I first saw him in the rain, half-shadowed beneath an overturned boat near the docks of Braymoor. His fur clung to his ribs like moss on stone, and his eyes, they didn't just look back at you. They looked through you, like he was searching for something you couldn't give. Nobody could touch him. Not the kids who tossed him bread. Not the old woman who whispered to him at dusk. But I stayed. I sat, said nothing, just carved wood beside him. I didn't know why, until the night he didn't run. That's when the past began to bleed through. The night Ash let me near him, there was no fanfare, no sudden trust, just a slow, quiet surrender. He didn't flinch when I set the bowl down, didn't growl when I moved my hand an inch closer than usual. The storm had rolled in early, and the docks were a mess of wind and sea spray. I think he stayed because he didn't have the strength to run anymore. Or maybe, just maybe, he was tired of running. The first few days were a blur. I brought him back to my shed, not the house. That would have been too much. He paced like a ghost trapped between walls, barely touched his food unless I wasn't looking. I slept with the door cracked in case he wanted to leave. He didn't. Every movement he made told a story I couldn't fully read. Flinching when a kettle whistled, snarling in his sleep, staring at corners like he expected something to come out. I didn't ask questions. I just carved, spoke when I needed to, and let the silence fill the rest. Maeve, the vet, came by once. She didn't even try to touch him, just left antibiotics and said, "He's seen things, Kalen. Let him tell you when he's ready." There was no plan, no training schedule, just trust, traded slowly. I was no savior. I just knew what it felt like to carry ghosts. Ash never moved like a normal dog. He slinked, low to the ground, ears flattened, eyes never staying long on one thing. He didn't bark, didn't wag, didn't do anything that made you think of the usual joy tied to dogs. He was silence in motion, and I found myself adjusting every little thing I did to avoid startling him. I'd open doors slowly, move tools gently, hum low when I worked just to fill the space with something soft. Still, there were days when he'd retreat back to the corner of the shed and not even look at me, as if some memory had dragged him backward. I began to notice patterns in his fear. The way he panicked when he heard heavy boots on the gravel path, or how he'd growl, not bark, if someone raised their voice nearby. Darragh, my neighbor, stopped by one morning, and when he dropped a wrench onto the wooden porch, Ash bolted under the workbench and shook like the ground was about to split open. Darragh muttered something about crazy strays and left without waiting for tea. I didn't stop him. What confused me most was how, despite all that fear, Ash never bit. He'd bare his teeth if cornered, but something held him back. A strange kind of restraint, as if he'd been punished for defending himself once before. I began to wonder, who had taught him that silence? And more frighteningly, what had been done to earn it? It was nearly 3 weeks in when the nightmares started. Ash would sleep in the corner near the stove, curled so tightly he looked more like smoke than a living thing. But then, around the same hour each night, he'd jolt up with a growl low and guttural, his legs kicking as if fighting off something that wasn't there. The first time, I thought he was chasing rabbits in his dreams. The second time, I knew better. His whimpers weren't playful. They were filled with a desperate kind of terror that cut through the quiet like broken glass. When I approached, he didn't recognize me. His eyes were wild, and for a second I saw something in them. Raw survival, almost. Trained. I started keeping a journal, scribbling down everything I observed. On the 4th night, when the storm knocked out the power, I lit a lantern and sat nearby. That's when I noticed it, the pattern on his side. Barely visible beneath his matted fur was a scar, shaped almost like a crude letter S, raised and uneven. It wasn't from an accident, it was deliberate. The next morning Maeve came by. I told her about the scar, about the way Ash froze when he heard the chain clink near the shed. She grew quiet, then said something I'll never forget. Some of the old training rings, they marked the dogs, not for love, for sport. That scar, Callan, might be more than just a memory. It might be a brand. That was the first time I realized I hadn't rescued a stray. I'd pulled a survivor from something far darker than I'd imagined. Maeve's words sank into me like cold iron. A brand. I kept turning it over in my head, imagining the kind of place that would mark a dog like that. It changed everything. I wasn't just dealing with trauma now. I was unraveling something older, more deliberate, and far crueler than neglect. I found myself becoming obsessive. I'd watch Ash like a hawk, trying to decipher every twitch, every pause in his breathing. Maeve became a quiet constant, dropping off old case files and books on canine PTSD, always careful not to step too close. "He's starting to trust you," she said one morning. "That means he might start remembering." I wasn't sure I wanted to know what he remembered. Dara, of course, had no patience for any of it. "You're keeping a time bomb," he muttered when he saw Ash growl at a barking dog across the lane. "You wait. He'll snap." But even as he said it, I knew Dara wasn't angry at the dog. He was afraid of what it represented, something brutal and broken that couldn't be explained with a leash and bowl of food. Tilda, the old woman who fed the strays, surprised me one afternoon. She stood by the gate, hands deep in her coat pockets, eyes on Ash. "That one's got old ghosts," she said. "You feel it too, don't you?" I nodded. "Then don't expect him to just forget. You'll have to walk through it with him." She turned and walked off before I could ask more, but her words stayed. ChatGPT said perfect. Here's block 5, 250 words, introduction of subplots or additional challenges. Block 5, introduction of subplots or additional challenges. A few days after Tilda's visit, the letters started showing up. At first, I thought they were just flyers, animal shelters asking for donations, community notices, the usual. But then came the envelope with no return address. Inside was a single photograph, faded and weather-worn. It showed a ring of concrete walls and rusted chain-link fencing. In the center, barely recognizable but unmistakable, stood a younger Ash. Leaner, more muscular, his ears cropped, posture rigid. His eyes weren't wild like now, they were blank, empty. No words, just the image. I felt sick. Maeve took one look and grew pale. This looks like one of the old illegal fight rings," she said, voice low. "They were shut down years ago, or so we thought." I wanted to burn the photo, forget it, but the past wasn't done with us. That same evening, a car idled outside my fence longer than necessary. I stepped out with Ash beside me. He didn't bark, but his whole body went rigid, a low growl vibrating through him like a wire pulled tight. The car rolled off without stopping, but something in my gut shifted. I started asking questions around Braymoor, quietly. The older fishermen clammed up. One finally muttered, "You don't want to be digging in those graves, lad." Meanwhile, Ash became more alert, almost aware. He began sleeping by the door, watching the road. The bond between us was growing stronger, but it wasn't built on comfort. It was forged in something deeper, shared fear, and the sense that our peace might not last. The stronger Ash's presence grew in my life, the harder it became to imagine the day he might leave it. Yet that thought haunted me as much as the idea of keeping him forever. What was best for him, truly? To stay here, tethered to a man with his own ghosts? Or to be placed with someone trained, someone who could offer structured rehabilitation, safety, certainty? Every day I watched him stretch further from the shadows. He'd rest his chin on my knee while I worked, or curl near the stove without flinching at the sound of firewood crackling. But at night, the growls returned, the trembling. I'd sit with him, hand on his back, both of us silent, breathing through something we couldn't name. Maeve said, "He trusts you, but trust doesn't erase history. Maybe he needs more than love." I didn't answer. I couldn't, because the truth was, I needed him too. More than I cared to admit. Was I helping him heal? Or was I selfishly holding on to the only living thing that understood what it meant to survive something unspeakable? That was the question I couldn't shake, and it was one I knew I'd eventually have to face. One morning, Ash didn't come when I called. The shed door was ajar, the bedding untouched. At first I thought maybe he'd slipped out for a run, but he never strayed far. Not anymore. I searched the yard, the lane, even down by the sea cliffs where he used to lurk when I first found him, but nothing. No paw prints, no bark, just a rising hum of dread in my chest. By midday, I was halfway into town, heart pounding, calling his name like a madman. It wasn't until I reached the edge of the fish market that I heard a sharp whistle, a signal. My head turned fast. There across the road was a man in a long coat, ducking into a white van. Just before the door closed, I caught a glimpse of fur, gray, trembling. Ash. I ran, but the van peeled off, too fast. That night, I sat by the stove, fingers twitching, stomach in knots. This wasn't random. Someone had taken him, and they knew exactly who he was. A slip of paper appeared under my door later. No note, just a time and place. Monday, 11 p.m., Croft Quarry. Maeve warned me not to go alone. Dara said I should call the authorities, but neither of them knew what this was. This wasn't about the law. This was about what Ash had escaped from and what wanted him back. For the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't let myself feel in a long while: rage. And I knew then I would go. I had to. I stood at the edge of Croft Quarry, the old gravel pit now nothing but ruins and shadows, shrouded by mist that crawled like breath over the rocks. The night was still, too still, the kind of still that feels deliberate, like the world itself is holding its breath. My boots crunched softly across broken stone as I stepped down into the hollow, the letter from under my door folded tight in my palm, damp from sweat. No sign of the van, no voices, no Ash, just silence. Every footstep pulled memories behind me like a net. The way Ash had begun sleeping with his nose pressed to the shed door, as if guarding us both. How he'd finally nudged my hand one morning, not out of hunger or fear, but out of something softer, something like trust. And how I'd frozen in that moment, unsure whether to weep or smile. I kept walking. A rusted gate creaked nearby. Then, movement. A faint, familiar sound, half whimper, half growl. My heart shot into my throat. Ash? I said it quietly, more prayer than call. And there he was, chained to a post, trembling, eyes wild again, not with fear, but recognition. He tried to stand, but his legs wobbled. I didn't hear the man approach, just his voice, calm, cold. You really think a broken thing can forget what it was made for? He stepped out of the shadows like smoke with eyes. I stepped between him and Ash without thinking. Ash didn't bark, but he moved closer to me, pressing against the back of my legs, shaking, silent. And in that moment, I realized something devastating and undeniable. Whatever this man had done to him, Ash remembered, and worse, he thought it might happen again. But I wasn't leaving without him, not this time. He stood just a few feet from me, that man, cloaked in the kind of calm that only ever belongs to the cruel. The way he held himself, shoulders squared, hands in his coat like he had all the time in the world, told me he wasn't worried. Not about me, not about anyone. His eyes flicked to Ash like he was assessing a piece of property. You think dogs like him choose peace? He said, voice low. He was born for it, made for pain. Ash let out a growl, weak but raw, the sound cracking as it rose in his throat. I felt it more than heard it. I crouched down, slowly, deliberately, and placed my hand on his back. He didn't flinch this time. He leaned into it, shaking still but grounding himself through touch. You don't own him anymore, I said. The man smirked. Don't I? He stepped forward too fast, and instinct took over. I reached for the bolt cutters Maeve had insisted I take, just in case. The chain clanked as I moved past Ash and snapped it with one hard squeeze. Ash staggered, then bolted behind me, his body low but ready. The man reached for something, maybe a leash, maybe worse, but I didn't wait to find out. I stood up and stared him down. If you touch him again, I said, voice steady but not calm, I won't call the police. I'll bury the truth where no one will find it. He didn't laugh. He didn't need to. He just turned and vanished into the dark. We walked home slowly that night, Ash limping, me bleeding slightly from where the chain had snapped back. But we walked together. For the first time, I think Ash believed I would never give him up. And for the first time, I knew he wouldn't run again. The next morning, the world hadn't changed, but I had. The fear that had lingered like fog inside me was replaced by something sharper, resolve. I looked at Ash lying by the fire, head on his paws, eyes half closed but watchful, and I knew we couldn't go back to the way things were. Not after the quarry. Not after that man. Maeve showed up just after sunrise, having heard what happened through a whisper chain only small towns like Braymoor know how to keep alive. She brought a duffel bag filled with medical supplies and a file. She didn't ask if Ash was okay. She crouched beside him and murmured softly, letting him sniff her sleeve. For the first time, he didn't flinch. You know he's not safe here, she said quietly. Not really. Not if they're still watching. I nodded. I'd been thinking the same. We were running out of hiding places. Then came the impossible question. You could give him to a sanctuary, Kalen. Somewhere far from this town. Somewhere he could start again. No threats, no memories. But he won't go with anyone else. Not now. I stared at the fire, hands wrapped around a mug I wasn't drinking from. If I send him away, he'll survive. But will he live? Maeve didn't answer. She didn't need to. By noon, Dara had come by too, this time not with skepticism, but with a battered old van he offered, just in case we needed to get gone fast. Everyone seemed to understand. Even Ash. He followed my every step that day, ears perked, tail twitching like he was waiting for a sign, any sign that we were staying or leaving. And all I could think was, whatever choice I make now, it's gonna mark both of us. By the time night fell, I still hadn't made the call. The van was packed with essentials, food, water, bedding, and the carvings I couldn't leave behind. I stood by the door with my hand on Ash's collar, the air thick with that terrible weight of indecision. He sat at my feet, calm but alert, his body tense like he could feel the pull in me. The choice had never been simple. Stay and risk the man returning, the group he was part of if he was part of one, finding us again. Or run. Sever all ties with Braymoor, the shed, the coastline, the people who had slowly started to believe in our bond, Maeve, Tilda, even Dara, in his own gruff way. I walked Ash down to the edge of the cliffs, our old spot, before everything began to unravel. The wind pulled at my coat, and Ash's fur danced in it like smoke again. I knelt beside him, brushing his side gently, tracing the scar that started this entire unraveling. He leaned into me, and for a moment, we just breathed. I whispered, "If I take you away from all this, will you be safer or more alone?" That's when I felt it. His head press against my chest, deliberate and still. Not fear, not instinct, choice. It wasn't about where we lived, it was about who we were, what we meant to each other. I hadn't just rescued him. He had rescued me too, from a silence I didn't know I was living in. When we stood and turned back toward the house, I knew. We weren't running. Not anymore. But we also weren't staying unseen. The next move wouldn't be escape, it would be confrontation. The following morning, I walked into the police station. It wasn't a dramatic entrance. No confrontation. Just me, a man with too many sleepless nights and a folder under one arm, photos, the scar, Maeve's notes, and a hand-drawn map of Croft Quarry with a red X marking the place I found Ash. I didn't give them everything, just enough to stir the dust and wake the right eyes. When I came home, Ash was waiting by the gate. Not pacing, not anxious, just waiting, watching. I'd made a decision that morning, one I hadn't fully understood until the words left my mouth in front of the officer. I'm not hiding anymore. He deserves better than the dark. The van never moved. The bags stayed packed for days, just in case, but slowly I started unpacking them. The carvings went back to the walls, the tools returned to their hooks. Ash claimed his place in the house, not just the shed. His head resting on the mat by the fire, the same way he used to rest it on my knee when I carved. Word spread slowly in town. Some people looked away when they passed us. Others nodded, silent gestures that meant more than they let on. I saw the van once more, parked at the edge of the harbor. But this time, I didn't run. I stared right back. Ash didn't growl. He just stood beside me still, like a shadow with weight. We were no longer victims of the past. We were witnesses to it. And we decided this story wouldn't end with silence. Ash still wakes up sometimes in the middle of the night. He doesn't cry out anymore, but I'll hear his breathing shift, quick, shallow. I'll get up, sit near him and wait. Sometimes he inches over, presses his weight into my side. Other nights he just stares into the dark like he's seeing something I can't. But now he always comes back. Our life isn't perfect. It's quiet, full of small routines and even smaller victories. A dog who once couldn't be touched now follows me from room to room. He waits by the door when I'm out and meets me like I'm the only person in the world. And in those moments I understand. Healing isn't about forgetting. It's about learning to live with the past, not beneath it. Some scars never fade, but they stop bleeding. We never found out exactly who the man at the quarry was. The investigation opened and closed like a breath held too long. But that doesn't matter anymore. Because the story didn't end in silence, it ended in choice. Ash chose me, and I chose to believe that even the most haunted souls can find peace, if someone stays long enough to show them how. If this story moved you, I ask just one thing. Don't look away from the strays, from the broken, from the ones who flinch when kindness comes too close. Sometimes they just need someone to wait, to be still, and to choose them over and over again. If this story stayed with you, if Ash's journey reminded you of someone you've met, or maybe even a part of yourself you've hidden away, then don't let it end here. Subscribe to the channel for more true and deeply personal rescue stories. Share this video with someone who believes in second chances, no matter how far gone someone might seem. And if you can, look around you. Maybe there's an ash waiting nearby. Maybe you're the quiet presence they need to begin again. This channel isn't just about dogs, it's about resilience, about trust, about the messy, beautiful way we heal when someone chooses to stay. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next story.